Now, prepare yourself for the most titillating experience of your life. The Late Night Spin with your host, Nico Kelly.
That's right, and welcome to the Weekend Sit and Spin. I am your host, Nico Kelly, coming to you live here from the AOK Production House, studio number 2. And boy, do we have a just packed episode for you tonight. Of course, this isn't the late night. I got to get new bumpers. I talk about this on every single episode, but I like my bumpers. So, even though it says the Late Night Spin, and I normally do it in the mornings, normally I do it on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. That is the new time. However, this particular weekend is Easter. I have family in for the holiday, and I'm simply not going to be able to do the show tomorrow morning. So instead, we are doing it live right now, and glad that you're here with us. Can you believe what's been happening in the news this past week? I mean, we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis. Can we agree on that? I mean, the likes of which I don't think I have ever seen in my lifetime. And it's really unbelievable. I mean, you have a child on television. His name is David Hogg. And I say child lightly because, of course, he's been basically destroying the reputation of the likes of Laura Ingraham this week. She has advertisers dropping like flies, and it's unbelievable. I mean, I can't believe that this is happening, that he is able to go on Twitter. That's incredible. I mean, I have to say, that's incredible to have that kind of power where you can go on Twitter and just give a list of the advertisers for a radio host, and they start dropping like flies because you are pushing a specific agenda. Now, the question that comes to mind for me is, do we listen to someone like David Hogg? Because, of course, the media is telling us that either you listen to him or you are a bigot, you are a whatever. I mean, you're bullying him. I think that's basically been the mantra. We've seen this pulled several different times. We've seen it with Barack Obama, where the media said if you don't listen to Barack Obama, you're a racist. We've seen it with Hillary Clinton, where they said if you're not listening to Hillary Clinton, if you're not a Hillary Clinton supporter, then you're a bigot. You are a male white supremacist. If you listen to Trump, then you are obviously just a terrible person. And now with David Hogg, we're seeing the narrative that if you don't listen to him, if you disagree with what he says, then you must be a bully. He is a child. Why would you not be nice to this person? And he's even gone on Twitter and talked about how he's being bullied by different people. I mean, it's really just absolutely incredible. So that's one of the things I want to get to today. But there is so much more as well, because in my opinion, it's being covered up by the likes of Stormy Daniels. And this I spoke to last week as well, that in my opinion, this is a nothing burger. Now, when I said that last week, and I use that term because, we saw that with the whole Trump campaign. But when I used the term last week, I was more or less talking about the fact that I just don't care about it. I don't really understand why it's being pushed in the media. I think in retrospect, I have started to kind of pull together exactly the answer to that question. And it's because we have a constitutional crisis happening right before our eyes. They are coming to take the guns. That's what they're doing. That's what this March for Our Lives is all about. Just think about the implications of a title for a women's march rebranding itself as March for Our Lives. That is massive. That is incredible. And it's extremely effective in the terms of the zombie-like masses that it's drawn. Of course, we know that those masses have been bussed in with funding from things like George Soros. I mean, the Women's March was funded by George Soros. That's on record. That cannot be argued. And so the question is, where do these people come from? How do they just take the time out of their day to go to a march like this in Washington, D.C., because we know they're being bussed in. We've seen the videos of just the hundreds of buses sitting all around Washington, D.C. Why is David Hogg not in school? I mean, I have a whole just laundry list of questions behind the reasoning for all of these things. But before I get to that, like I said, I really want to talk about this Stormy Daniels thing, because in my opinion, this is being used as a cover-up. I mean, when you go watch a march like March for Our Lives, if you are a common sense person like me, you don't even have to be a conservative. You don't have to be a gun lover. You don't have to be any of those things to ask some of these questions. For example, why is David Hogg not in school? How is he doing all these interviews? I saw the whole thing about him not being accepted into the schools that he wanted to be, and Laura Ingraham called him out, and now he's attacking her on social media. And yet the whole justification for having to listen to him is that you're a bully if you don't. It seems to me that he is the bully, and he's being, for some reason, given this massive platform. He is a child, a teenager. This is someone who has not even discovered himself yet. How could he possibly know more about the Second Amendment, our Constitution, which has been unrivaled, unchanging, developed by our forefathers who were extremely intelligent men of their days, not teenagers? How is it that this person proposes to know more than any of us do, any of the Americans through the decades, any of our forefathers, when he hasn't even grown up yet, hasn't even gone to college yet, doesn't even know if he's getting into college, but yet he's being allowed this huge platform? Well, the media is covering up for all of those questions by buying in to the sexual misconduct nothing burger of Trump hooking up with a porn star. And it's just, to me, it's just the craziest thing to see that there's a 60 minutes episode with this person in it. I mean, and not only that, this was the most viewed, okay? This was the highest rated episode of 60 Minutes in years. How incredibly sad is that? Okay, TV ratings, CBS's Stormy Sit Down has 60 Minutes at decade high. Decade, ladies and gentlemen. In 10 years, this is the highest rated episode of 60 Minutes. I remember a time when 60 Minutes was a go-to show on Sunday evenings. Everyone watched it. I never really much cared for it, but I still watched it every once in a while because they had the interesting interviews. They had credit out looking back on it based on what we've seen recently with the mainstream media and the discrediting of the whole system. I wonder how they ever got to that level, because it, to me, just seems to be complete propaganda. But does it not boggle your mind a little bit to see that it took a porn star to put them on a level in which they can have real viewers? 22 million viewers. Just a little more than the reboot of Roseanne, by the way, which is also just busting out. 18 million. And let me tell you, I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. I wasn't the biggest fan of Roseanne back in the day. I do love John Goodman. I think he's a great actor. And certainly Roseanne has changed her outlook on politics recently. I mean, she was not always this staunch conservative that she's being portrayed as in the new reboot, and that is her outspoken real self these days. She really is a conservative. She really is a Trump supporter. I think she's been turned by the alternate media, for the likes of Michael Savage, the likes of InfoWars, the likes of Breitbart, and, you know, Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. And I mean, these are the people that have influenced her. She's outspoken about that. She said that on record. But that wasn't always her outlook on life. If you go back to the old Roseanne, which, I mean, you know, it was a decent show. It wasn't my favorite. I watched it. I thought it was funny. It kind of has the same aura around it as Married with Children. I remember looking back in Ren and Stimpy. I look back on what I was doing, the age that I was when this was actually on television. I was quite young. I don't think my parents really cared much for me watching these shows. And I don't know if that has more to do with the public's just general misunderstanding of a show they don't actually watch, or if it has to do with the actual morals in the show. it was really a portrayal of real life American family. And looking back on it, I think we were still in that Bill Clinton era rose glasses lifestyle where, you know, everybody was just kind of fat and happy, and we didn't really want to admit that there was a dark side to family life. But Roseanne was one of those shows, and so was Married with Children, that really just showed it as it was. And for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And whether you liked it or not, they put it right there in your face. And that's definitely what this reboot also portrayed, was here's what it is, here's what it's like it or not. You know, we're going to try to make it funny, but other than that, this is what's really going on. I mean, you know, this isn't Seinfeld, you know, this isn't Frasier. Even though those shows are relatable, they're a little unrealistic. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I loved it. I thought it was funny. I think you should go watch it. Nevertheless, that pulled in 18.1 million viewers the last I checked. This episode of 60 Minutes topping 22 million viewers. It easily outpaces the last marquee episode, which was Trump's 2016 interview. But it still trails the one with Barack Obama, 24.5. But that was back in 2008. Literally 10 years ago was the last time they had this many viewers. And this wasn't even that many. CBS ruled Sunday night thanks to a hot button 60 Minutes airing just after NCAA basketball. This is coming from The Hollywood Reporter to give you an idea of what this is all about. Now, I didn't want to go in depth into this, but the media is forcing my hand because it's turned into this massive phenomenon, and I'm simply going to cover it because I think it's important to understand how one thing is not necessarily mutually exclusive from the hog situation. We're going whole hog on this episode, by the way. I've been wanting to use that joke. But clearly they are related because they're happening at the same time, and nobody seems to care about all of these questions surrounding David Hogg and why he's been given this massive platform. Everybody is solely focused on Stormy Daniels and who Trump had sex with. Who cares? But the network's 60 Minutes sit down with proclaimed one-time Donald Trump paramour Stormy Daniels reaped especially strong rewards, topping 22 million viewers with final adjustments. It easily ranks as the most watched episode in nearly a decade, blowing past the recent high, the post-election chat with Trump himself, which pulled in 20 million in 2016. The show got a late start thanks to the basketball, but it hardly hurt the heavily hyped segment. And that's another big thing. They hyped it like crazy. I mean, the mainstream media put this thing in your face for 2 weeks, maybe longer, leading up to this stupid show. I didn't watch it. Did any of you watch it? I mean, if you're listening to this and you watched it, and even if you listen to this as a podcast, go and leave a comment at Spreaker Web Radio, SPREAKER.com. Search for the Sit and Spin Radio Network, and you can leave a comment. You can let me know. Did you watch this? What did you think about it? The late start for 60 Minutes means there may still be some adjustments. At any rate, it's the most watched episode of the Vulnerable News magazine this season, and even approaches the memorable high of 2008 when nearly 25 million tuned in to see Barack Obama. It certainly got an assist from its lead-in March Madness overage. I've got a little video here from The Hollywood Reporter about the situation. You can take a listen.
And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "It's a beautiful little girl. It'd be a shame if something happened to her mom."
The ratings are in for Stormy Daniels' Sunday night sit-down with CBS's 60 Minutes. The interview topped 22 million viewers with final adjustments. It easily ranks as the most-watched episode in nearly a decade, blowing past the recent high, the post-election chat with Trump himself, which brought in 20 million viewers in 2016. During the interview, she told Cooper she realized she was breaking a non-disclosure agreement she signed in return for a payment of $130,000, which she claims she felt pressured to sign from Trump's attorney, Michael Cohen, just before the 2016 presidential election. But it was necessary for her to speak out now. She said, "I was perfectly fine saying nothing at all, but I'm not okay with being made out to be a liar, or people thinking that I did this for money, and people are like, oh, you're an opportunist." She also made it clear early in the interview that she was not an unwilling victim, saying, "This is not a hashtag Me Too. I was not a victim. I've never said I was a victim." The adult film star explained that Trump invited her to his hotel room in July 2006 after they met at a celebrity golf tournament. She said Trump talked mostly about himself, asking her if she had seen his latest magazine cover. She claims she then spanked him with that very issue.
He's like, "Wow, you you are special. You remind me of my daughter.
She told Cooper that not long after, they had unprotected sex. She also said Trump told her not to worry about his wife, Melania, who just given birth to their son.
He brushed it aside, said, oh, yeah, you know, don't worry about that. We have separate rooms.
She also claimed Trump called her often afterward and said he would try and get her on Celebrity Apprentice. As for any text messages or photos involving Trump she may or may not possess, she said she could not comment on the advice of her lawyer, Michael Avenatti. She and Avenatti have filed a lawsuit in an effort to invalidate the NDA, arguing that Trump never signed the document. Trevor Potter, a former chairman of the Federal Election Commission appointed by President George H.W. Bush, said the payment is problematic for the president. Potter told Cooper it's a $130,000 in-kind contribution by Cohen to the Trump campaign, which is about $126,500 above what he's allowed to give. He added, and if he does this on behalf of his client, the candidate, that is a coordinated, illegal, in-kind contribution by Cohen for the purpose of influencing the election, of benefiting the candidate by keeping this secret.
All right, that's enough of that. I think you get the point. And so, again, a lot of just TMI details about something that may or may not have happened. And I think what's funny is that she made that statement. She's not a victim. She never said she was a victim. And she was completely fine with being silent. Well, if she was completely fine with being silent, you know, she's trying to play it that, oh, well, I was fine with being silent, but I'm not okay with being called a liar. Well, you wouldn't be being called a liar if you hadn't said anything to start with. So I don't even buy the story just on the outset. My question is, why now? Why is this coming up? And do the American people even care about it? And that is the question that's being posed by The Hill. Do voters care about Trump's sexual history? Former President Richard Nixon posed this somewhat sarcastic rhetorical question to me shortly after Bill Clinton was elected president in 1992. This is coming from the opinion contributor to The Hill, Monica Crowley, and she says, the question was, the president is a womanizer? So what? That's what Richard Nixon said after Bill Clinton was elected in 1992. 26 years later, with similar questions raised over the past private behavior of the current president, the country once again shrugs, so what? Appearing on 60 Minutes Sunday night, former adult film actress Stormy Daniels detailed an alleged one-time sexual encounter with Donald Trump over a decade ago. Key point there, a decade ago. Does it have anything to do with his current administration? No. Does it have anything to do with the man who is now leading our country? No. Nobody had a problem when it was Bill Clinton, who we knew was a sexual deviant, who we knew was a womanizer, who we knew couldn't actually be happily married to a Hillary Clinton who is just, you know, clearly a beard for the whole situation. But nevertheless, Stormy Daniels being thrown in our face. When he was newly married husband and father, on 3 previous occasions, she signed documents denying any relationship, but now claims she lied out of fear. She says she accepted... I need to make sure to turn that thing off. She says she accepted a cash payout for her silence from Trump's personal attorney shortly before the 2016 election and was threatened in 2011 over her desire to talk, but has yet to offer evidence of proof. And again, another key point here. I mean, you have to keep in mind the timing when you see things like this. She got a cash payout for her silence, supposedly, before the election. Threatened in 2011, never seen any proof. The interview drew a big audience, attracted like moths to the flame of anticipated salaciousness, predictable voyeurism, and red-hot Trump-driven polarization. Other media outlets, similarly driven by the hunger for ratings and anything damaging the president, also descended into a Stormy obsession, hoping for a Trump stag film and a violation of campaign finance law. They didn't get any of that. Despite their relentless attempts to legitimize the story, it has not gained any meaningful political traction beyond gossip. Long ago, relationships between consenting adults earn an eye roll, not the widespread condemnation provoked by abusive behavior now universally regarded as intolerable in the Me Too era. And I think, again, that's what I take away from this, is the change in culture that we're seeing, where something that even 10 years ago, when this supposedly happened, would have been nothing in the public eye. I mean, okay, everybody has their, skeletons in the closet. When you run for public office, all of those get dug up and used as leverage against you in one way or the other. We know that. But they did some extreme vetting on Trump. I mean, if you'll remember, when the campaign was going on, there was some extreme vetting. It was all over the news. We were looking at a Trump. He did this, he did that. Nothing was ever substantiated. Never found any real damaging dirt during the campaign. How did this not come up back then? Was it because she got paid off? Why would she now be okay with a possible lawsuit? I mean, if Trump actually did pay her, which, according to the story by Stormy herself, the pay didn't come from Trump, it came from his lawyer. But why would she now give up that money? Is she hoping to restart her own career? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And if we look back to a flashback here from the Daily Wire, MSM deemed Clinton-Lewinsky affair nothing more than consensual sex. It is only about sex, wrote the New York Times back in August of 1998, if we'll all collectively remember. Maybe it is about sex, was the quote from Slate that month. Another quote from Time magazine the next month, which would have been September of 98. High crimes, or is it just a sex cover-up? That was the tack back then, after 50-year-old Bill Clinton was accused of having sex with a 22-year-old White House intern, often in the Oval Office. Clinton vehemently denied the allegation. If you remember, the quote was, I want you to listen to me, I did not have sexual relationships with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told a single person to lie, not a single time, never. Before the whole mess unraveled, Clinton also said, it is time to stop the pursuit of personal destruction and the prying into private lives and get on with our national life. Of course, he did have sex with her, and he lied about it. Worse, he lied about it not just to every person in America, but under oath, which is what made it the crime of perjury. In fact, he was impeached by the House of Representatives not for having sex with an intern, but for lying under oath and committing obstruction of justice and covering up the affair. While he wasn't removed from office, Clinton, a lawyer, was disbarred for 5 years. Unbelievable. So why now? Again, that's the question I just want you to keep in the back of your mind. And by the way, she attempted to push the jury trial, the case against Trump, through in a quicker manner, and she's just been rejected. This is coming from Breitbart. A porn star who said she had an affair with Donald Trump is suing so he can discuss the alleged relationship. Can't have a jury trial or question the president under oath because the request is premature. That's coming from a federal judge in Los Angeles. Stormy Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford, has been seeking to invalidate the non-disclosure agreement she signed days before the 2016 presidential election and offered to return the $130,000 she was paid to set the record straight. Daniels' attorney is Michael Avenatti. On Wednesday asked for a jury trial and sought sworn testimony from Trump and his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, about the payment that was made to Daniels as part of the non-disclosure agreement. Trump's attorneys filed documents in federal court in Los Angeles earlier this month, seeking to compel private arbitration in the case and argue that Daniels could owe about $20 million for violating the agreement. Again, I ask, why would she be willing to do this to herself? Daniels argues the agreement is legally invalid because it was not only signed by Daniels and Cohen, it was not signed by Trump. She said she had sex with Trump once in 2006, and their relationship and continued for about a year. Trump married his current wife, Melania, in 2005, and their son, Barron, was born in 2006. So this is the whole thing. All right, I'm going to move on from this. We're going to get to the David Hogg thing as well pretty soon. But again, to me, this whole thing is just absolutely crazy. And my question to the audience is, do you care? Is this something that you're interested in? What would you do if it came out that Trump did actually have this affair with this person? Would that change your mind about what he's accomplished in office? Would that change your mind about things that maybe you don't like about him? Is this a complete nothing burger? Why would the media put all their eggs in this basket, no pun intended, if it has no bearing on the political landscape whatsoever. Are they really that desperate? Or could they be covering up for a Second Amendment constitutional crisis? Now, I want to get to something else here with North Korea. Kim Jong-un made a surprise China visit, according to sources. Now, they're basing this off of the idea that they saw a train, which was mysterious to the Chinese people because it's not one that they normally see, coming through the country, and evidently it's a similar train to what his father would have taken to go to China so many years ago. This is first trip outside of isolated state since taking power in 2011. That's amazing. First time he's left the country. Now, that's, in my opinion, the reason that he's rattling so much. The sword rattling that's going on is because Kim Jong-un wants North Korea to be taken seriously as a world power. Now, of course, they're not. I don't know that we could even make the case that they're close to being that. I think that they could be giving the funding to get there. But even if China decided to turn them into a world power, which, that's not out of the realm of possibility, in my opinion, it's not something that could happen quickly. I mean, that's something that would take years just to put that kind of infrastructure in place to put those kind of. I mean, just because he has a couple of missiles doesn't mean anything. But nevertheless, he feels like they should be a world power, and I don't think it should be pushed aside that that's the reasoning behind all of this. Because knowing that that's the case may help solve the crisis of what to do about it. And I think Trump gets that. I think that's why he's trying to sit down with Kim Jong-un, is to just really talk about it man to man. Trump is a deal maker. He wants to talk to these people. He wants to look them in the eye. I get that. And so could he make a difference by going and sitting down and actually trying to negotiate? Yes, I do believe that that's possible. Would it do any good? Who knows? I think Kim Jong-un is a nutball, so that remains to be seen. But nevertheless, for the first time since 2011, a lot longer, for me, that year kind of blew my mind a little bit because I kind of forgot how long it's been since he took power. 7 years. Mysterious move comes weeks after Trump agreed to meet with him. Kim Jong-un. And now, another thing to keep in mind here is that there's a lot of back and forth, and we're going to get into this a little bit, but there's a lot of back and forth going on with China as well. And so I made the statement on this show a couple of weeks ago that I thought that it's a good idea for Trump to sit down with him, in my opinion, but I think that he should tread lightly, and I think we can all agree with that. But what does that mean exactly? Well, it means to take seriously something like a visit to China, because if we're having a problem with China, and then he was trying to encourage China to do something about Kim Jong-un because everyone keeps saying that he is the junkyard dog of China, that they have full control over what North Korea is doing. That could be evidenced by this trip, or it could be the other way around. But Kim Jong-un made a surprise visit to Beijing on his first known trip outside of North Korea since taking power in 2011. 3 people with the knowledge of this visit gave this information. Further details of this trip, including how long he would stay and who he would meet, were not immediately available. The people asked not to be identified. Speculation about a possible visit by a high-ranking North Korean official circulated around the Chinese capital Monday after Japan's Kyodo News reported that a special train may have carried Kim through the northeastern border city of Dandong. Nippon TV showed footage of a train arriving Monday in Beijing that looked similar to the one used by Kim Jong Sr. to visit the country shortly before his death in 2011. The train, believed to be carrying Un, was observed Tuesday leaving Beijing, according to Reuters. Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokeswoman Kyo Chung-ying told a briefing in Beijing Tuesday that she had no information about any visit by Kim or the train reported. The unannounced visit is the latest in a series of diplomatic power plays in Asia as Donald Trump battles to lower the U.S. trade deficit becomes entangled with his effort to get Kim to give up his nuclear weapons. President Xi Jinping has found himself preparing for a trade war with Trump, even after supporting progressive rounds of United Nations sanctions against the Kim regime. Now, speaking of those other power plays, there are a couple that have happened this week, and this is all important to me because, again, while the media is focused on a porn star, the real world is happening all around us. And I feel like the general public doesn't really understand the brevity of these situations. Preparing for war, China sends massive navy for South China Sea war games after President Xi Jinping vowed to wage bloody battle for world domination. Now, Xi Jinping has also been basically made a dictator of China by fiat. He actually basically asked the Congress, or they don't have a Congress, but whatever it is over there, to elect him, supreme leader or whatever. And that's basically what's happened at this point. So dozens of Chinese ships are exercising this week with an aircraft carrier in a show of force off Hainan Island in the South China Sea. Now, this is the much debated over area of the ocean there. And the thing is, this has been a major trade route for many different countries, including us, including Japan, including the Philippines, and so forth, for many, many years. I mean, this is all about open trade here. And China is basically saying, we own this. They're just kind of grabbing it up like the federal government grabs of land in our country. China's grabbing the ocean and saying, this is ours, you can't come here. And that's why it's such a major issue when that happens, and all these skirmishes that have been kind of pseudo taking place between China and Japan, because you can't just grab international trade routes and say that it's yours. It doesn't work like that. In retrospect, it probably wasn't a good idea to give up the Panama Canal to China, don't you think? Anyway, that's another story. So that's what this show of force in the South China Sea is all about. Pictures provided by Planet Labs, Inc. show a Chinese carrier group has entered the trade route as part of combat drills. The Chinese Navy claims the movements are part of routine annual exercises. The Liaoning carrier group last week traversed the Taiwan Strait, according to the Taiwanese Defense Ministry. This is kind of like the Great White Fleet, Teddy Roosevelt here, happening over in Asia. These pictures have emerged less than a week after Xi Jinping said his country is prepared to fight bloody battles to retain its right as a superpower. And that has everything to do with Trump putting tariffs just to try to level the playing field as far as our trade goes. Sailing in a line formation more suited to visual propaganda than military maneuvers, the flotilla was headed by what appeared to be submarines. Security expert at the California-based Middlebury Institute of Strategic Studies, Jeffrey Lewis, said the images showed the first confirmation that the carrier was joining the drills. Now, this is important for two reasons. Number one, it came out this past week as well from The Hill that Russia and China are now eclipsing the U.S. in hypersonic missiles, and this is prompting fears. Like I said, this comes from The Hill. Russia and China are outpacing the United States in the development of super-fast missile technology. Pentagon officials and key lawmakers are warning. Russia says it has successfully tested a so-called hypersonic missile this month, while China tested a similar system last year, expected to enter service soon. You can take a listen to The Hill.
Russia and China are outpacing the United States in the development of super-fast missile technology, Pentagon officials and key lawmakers are warning. Russia says it successfully tested a so-called hypersonic missile this month, while China tested a similar system last year, expected to enter service soon. Senator Jim Inhofe, a Republican from Oklahoma, said, quote, "Right now, we're helpless." He said that in advocating for more.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. And not only that, the other thing, along with the military empowerment that's going on overseas, and again, that's important because we're getting into pseudo-political skirmishes with the likes of China and Russia. I mean, you see the tensions rising between Trump and the Russians because he's under so much pressure to do just that. So the question is, are the talking heads around Trump just trying to get him in trouble? I think it's completely it's a very valid question. And if that's what's going on, then the other question is, why would Trump listen to that? He must know that that's what's going on. But the U.S. needs to borrow almost $300 billion this week. Uncle Sam needs to borrow a ton of money this week. This is coming from CNN. In the middle of a fight with its biggest creditor, the United States plans to sell about $294 billion worth of debt, according to the Treasury Department. That is the highest for a week since the record set during the 2008 financial crisis. Federal revenue is declining because of President Trump's tax cuts, so the government needs to borrow more to make ends meet. At the same time, Washington's borrowing costs have climbed rapidly in recent months. Now, of course, the tax cuts are a good thing. He promised them. We got them. Not complaining about that. But at the same time, he signed that massive omnibus spending bill and got nothing for it. We talked about this last week. In some interpretations, that spending bill actually bars him from being able to build the southern border. Now, there has been construction going on with the fence in California. Calexico, they're calling it. And so, in some ways, it seems like Trump is, in fact, he tweeted out about this week, that he is getting the construction going, and so that, that promise is taking place. But in the spending bill, it says no funds can go to the border wall. So if they're claiming it's a fence because it's not the walls that he went and toured that were in New Mexico, he actually went down there and took a look at prototypes. Those specific prototypes have not been allowed funding from the spending bill. So they're repairing a fence, making it bigger, making it nicer, or whatever. So Trump's tweeting out that they're doing something about the border wall. But the spending bill does not fund the actual wall itself. But it does refund Planned Parenthood. It does fund NPR. It does give a raise to the Congress. These are things, we have a Republican Congress in place. We have a Republican House. We have a Republican Senate. We have a Republican president. So there is no reason, and a tie in the Supreme Court with a new appointment. There is no reason why Trump should feel pressured to pass this unless it's the Republicans themselves who are pressuring him to do that. So again, you can't put in tax cuts, which I'm glad we got them, and then in the same week sign a massive spending bill without demanding cuts take place from Congress. I don't blame him in full, because the president does not hold the keys to the purse or whatever. He doesn't hold the purse strings. Congress does, but he can go over there and demand it. And that's something I don't see him doing. There's been a lot of, shall we say, criticism of him in the past few days by people like Ann Coulter and so forth, that he's only in this to please the banks. I'm not saying I've come along to that side of the argument yet, but that spending bill really set this whole thing back. And now we see that we're having to borrow another $300 billion. That's just unbelievable, this number. Quote, the amount of debt coming on the market this week is extremely large. That's Rick Reeder, Global Chief Investment Officer of Fixed Income at BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager. I've got a video here why Trump's tax cuts could backfire. You can take a listen.
The Fed. That's the old saying on Wall Street. It's also an adage President Trump and the GOP ignored when they passed huge new tax cuts. Why? Well, tax cuts stimulate the economy. Think of all that extra money floating around. But all that money could end up overheating the economy and causing inflation at the very same moment the Federal Reserve is trying to cool things off. The Fed is raising interest rates and unwinding its massive balance sheet. Essentially, it's stepping on the economy's brakes, even as Washington pushes on the gas. And if the tax cuts do end up overheating the economy and creating inflation, the Fed is going to have to work even harder to tamp it down. That means more aggressive interest rate hikes, which Wall Street really won't like. Ironically, past Fed chiefs used to scold Congress for not doing enough to spur economic growth.
It is true that monetary policy, I think, has carried an awful lot of the burden for this recovery, and we're more than happy to share that burden more equally with fiscal policy and other policymakers.
Now, Washington.
And that was Ben Bernanke from a few years ago. Now, Trump's poll ratings are holding steady at about 45%, and I think that has a lot to do with several different aspects of his administration at this point, because we have had some wins. We had the head of the EPA saying that he was going to kick out all junk science. Love it. That's a win. We have Trump moving on the EPA, saying that he made changes because he wasn't happy with the speed with which vets were being taken care of. Love it. You can take a listen to that as well.
Just like we're going to have choice at the VA, we're going to have choice for these great people. You're going to also have choice with jobs. You're going to have choice with jobs. Our veterans are going to have choice, and you're going to have choice with jobs. We're going to be investing in our workers and improving our health care facilities for our incredible veterans. We're making some changes that are good. And we've made a lot of progress with the veterans, but I want to get them choice. And they didn't give us choice. The Democrats didn't want the vets to have choice. When the vets are online, because there's a 25-day wait, there's a 6-month wait, guys are online and women, they're vets, they're great, they're our greatest people. And they got a problem. And it could be fixed. By the time they see the doctor, it's over. It's over. Not going to happen. We're going to have real choice. That's why I made some changes, because I wasn't happy with the speed with which our veterans were taken care of. I wasn't happy with it. And we made a lot of progress. The Accountability Act. For years they've been trying to get it. For decades they've been trying to get VA accountability. When somebody does a bad job in the Veterans Administration, they couldn't do anything about it. They were protected. You could do anything. They had sadists that treated our vets.
So, again, making some wins there. I mean, we've been wanting to see some changes at the VA for some time. We've talked about that on this show. But when you pass a spending bill, I think it's only natural to expect some criticism coming from former Trump supporters. And I myself am questioning very hard what he's thinking. Take a listen to Ann Coulter on Fox Business Network's Lou Dobbs Tonight.
Wall in the wake of the omnibus spending bill, President Trump's reported plan to push the military to fund the construction of that wall, and much more. Joining me, political commentator, best-selling author, Ann Coulter. Ann, great to have you with us. You have been critical of the president of late. Broken-hearted, you described yourself at one point. Now with a wall rising along that fence that you saw there.
They're repainting some rickety fences, Lou, but I mean, if it's not just another scam to keep us saying, oh, it's coming, it's coming. Yeah, he can use the military. Some of us have been saying that forever. He's the commander-in-chief. No legislature, no court can take that away. He has full authority to repel an attack on the border. I mean, even though I was on a tweet storm last night, I got in rather late, and I was a little intemperate in some of my tweets. Oh, no. I'm sorry about some of the language. However, I was right on the law. And that is, look, even the War Powers Act, which many say is unconstitutional. Every president, I believe, has said it's unconstitutional. But we needn't get into that. But that is purportedly a restriction on the president's power to deploy military forces. Even that says we can't do anything about a president repelling an attack on the nation. That's what we're dealing with here. We're losing more people to heroin and fentanyl overdoses every year than we lost in the entire course of the Vietnam War.
116 a day through 2016, and it's been rising at 54% in most of the major cities across this country since then.
And I would recommend to anyone interested in the topic, I don't usually recommend liberal journalists, but it happens to be a fantastic book.
Be careful here. Be careful.
Sam Quinones's book, Dreamland. Yeah. He was a long time, in fact, I quote him in Adios America. He's a great reporter. He has a great book on the opioid crisis and heroin and fentanyl. And you'll see 98% of the heroin and fentanyl is coming from Mexico. It's a problem of not having a wall on our border.
Well, it's very simple. I mean, it really is.
All right, I think you get it. The point being that with this omnibus spending, a lot of former Trump supporters are starting to question what exactly is going on. And I think we need a few more wins in the win column there, because otherwise he's going to start really alienating his base. I mean, the tax cuts are great, but $300 billion to borrow does not bode well. All right. I'd like to move on now to the real issue at hand this week. And that is the conspiracy corner of the week, that we are in the midst of a Second Amendment constitutional crisis in our country, and it's being covered up by the porn star Stormy Daniels. John Paul Stevens this weekend came out on the New York Times with an opinion piece, a hit piece, saying, repeal the Second Amendment. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can go read it for yourself, but, I'll just give you the idea here. It says, rarely in my lifetime have I seen the type of civic engagement school children and their supporters demonstrated in Washington and other major cities throughout the country this past Sunday. These demonstrations demand our respect. Now, I don't know that they demand our respect, quite frankly, because like I said, it's not made up of children, but they are putting children on the platform to make us feel bad about the fact that we are gun owners. We, as American citizens, don't have to feel bad about the fact that we have guns. That is a constitutional crisis, a constitutional right, which does not mean that the Constitution is the only thing that gives us that right. The Constitution says they are God-given rights, inalienable rights, rights that cannot be revoked by a governing democracy. So, and these are children who, I mean, you've seen the videos from things like campus reform and so forth, where they're asking the people at these marches questions about what is an AR-15, what's the difference between that and a shotgun, and so on and so on. None of them know the answer to these things. I think these are, in terms of gun rights, these are uneducated children who don't know what's going on. They're in the midst of a fad, a frenzy that makes them feel good to be a part of. Now, I understand that they've all come through a major tragedy. I feel bad for the families of the Parkland shooting. I hate it when you see any kind of shooting like this, but you can't blame all gun owners in America for it, because number one, the videos come out. We talked about this, that the sheriff's deputy stood outside the school while this murder was taking place. That's a major problem. Why was this guy not rushing in and stopping this tragedy from happening? And he had a gun. And why is it that all of these gun control activists get to have armed bodyguards, but I'm not allowed to defend myself according to them? So why is there no investigation of the fact that this guy stood down? Of course, you see it, you hear it on Fox News, you hear it on this show, you hear it on a lot of alternative media shows, but the only thing you see on CNN is about the porn star and David Hogg. He continues that they reveal the broad public support for legislation to minimize the risk of mass killings of school children and others in our society. This is the same kind of logic that goes behind overpopulation. We are not overpopulated as the earth goes. Los Angeles is overpopulated because there's not enough, room in that small city. Well, it's not a small city, but the amount of land that's there is not big enough for the amount of people that are there. So yes, in Los Angeles, there's overpopulation. In New York City, there's probably some overpopulation going on. There's a little bit of overpopulation going on here in Charleston right now, where we've got 40 people moving here on average per day. But that does not mean that our country is overpopulated. There are many underpopulated areas throughout the country. We have lots of room here. The earth has lots of room. You can't take Los Angeles and take activists from Los Angeles and go around saying that we need to kill everybody on earth because we're overpopulated, or you need to stop using air conditioning. It's ridiculous. Well, it's the same thing with this March for Our Lives. You can't, just because there's a bunch of people that showed up to Washington, D.C., bust in with the funding of George Soros, say that, 70% of America believes that you need to take away all the guns. And that's the talking point. I saw that on Tucker Carlson, saying 70% of Americans believe that the Second Amendment needs to be repealed or changed. That's BS. I don't buy that for a second. Where do they get that number? 70%? I don't think so. think it's probably 30% that think that, 70% that don't. But we're too nice and we're too conservative to go out and march. That's the real issue. The liberals, the one thing they have shown, the one thing that they have proven is that they know how to rally. They know how to rally their own troops to be able to go out and march in a protest. Good for them. But that does not represent the majority of America. He says that support is a clear sign to lawmakers to enact legislation prohibiting civilian ownership of semi-automatic weapons, increasing the minimum age to buy a gun from 18 to 21 years old, and establishing more comprehensive background checks on all purchasers of firearms. There are already comprehensive background checks. I've also seen the argument that they need, that what these kids really just want is a database. Well, what they're saying they want is a database of gun owners queried against a database of mental health patients. That is a violation of HIPAA laws, which is also completely unconstitutional. And I've seen the argument from the liberal left against that, saying, oh, well, what they want is just a comprehensive background. If you are a mental health patient, that you're not allowed to buy a firearm. That is already a law. It's already there. That's already on the books. There is a comprehensive FBI background check to buy a gun. It's like people saying the immigration laws need to be fixed. They don't. They need to be followed. They need to be acknowledged. And I would say the majority of gun stores do follow this. You can't walk into a gun store and buy a gun without getting checked. Has anybody listening to this show had that happen to them? Maybe tell me, in the comments, let me know. Hey, I bought a gun at a gun store and was not given a background check, because that's illegal. But I don't think that's happening. Yet that, nevertheless, is their talking point. And raising the age from 18 to 21, are you kidding me? You can go fight for this country in the army before 21 using a gun. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not an advocate of lowering the drinking age, but I've also always had a problem with the fact that you can't drink till you're 21, even though you can go and die for your country before you're 21. I mean, I think that some of these age limits are a little ridiculous, but especially to be a gun owner, because that is a constitutional, God-given right. And as long as you have the proper training and understand how to use a gun, in my opinion, you have a God-given, inalienable right to be able to own one. But the demonstrators should seek more effective and more lasting reform. They should demand a repeal of the Second Amendment. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Right here. Go look it up for yourself in the New York Times. All of you out there saying these kids don't want to come take your guns. All of you out there saying that's not what they're after for the March for Our Lives. Here it is right here in black and white. New York Times. John Paul Stevens says they should demand a repeal of the Second Amendment. Now, Trump says that we are never going to repeal the Second Amendment. He says the Second Amendment is safe and we will never repeal it. Now, I tend to believe him when he says that. I also believed him, however, when he said that he wasn't going to spend all that money. Here it is from Breitbart. Trump doubles down. We're going to protect our Second Amendment. That came from a tweet that he put out that said the Second Amendment will never be repealed. As much as Democrats would like to see this happen, and despite the words yesterday of former Supreme Court Justice Stevens, no way, we need more Republicans in 2018 and must always hold the Supreme Court. I hope he stands by those words, because some of what I've seen in his rhetoric has been telling me that he can be easily swayed against that opinion. But why a former Supreme Court justice would go on a national publication and talk about repeal? This is a Supreme Court justice. They are supposed to defend the law. That's what they do. Concern that a national standing army might pose a threat to the security of the separate states led to the adoption of that amendment, by the way, which provides that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. And he says today that concern is a relic of the 18th century. I heartily disagree with you, because the whole reason that happened was because the British came to take the guns. And now we have a bunch of liberals coming to try to take our guns. And listen, that is going to start. I mean, 1776 will rise again when you try to take our firearms. I mean, that's a statement that was made famous by Alex Jones, and I think it holds true right now. You're talking about a real bloody civil war when that day comes, and that's not a war that these liberals are going to win because they're not gun owners. They don't have a constitutional amendment that says you don't have a right to bear arms. In fact, it says you do. And so I think that's going to be a very difficult war for them to win. Now, they're going little by little. We saw this from the Sun Sentinel this week. Bullet control. Wasserman Schultz wants background checks for ammunition buyers. Oh, dear God. Debbie Wasserman. Now again. Now I do understand the loopholes. Okay, that you could technically pass a gun down to your offspring, family heritage kind of thing. So there are ways around obtaining a firearm without having a background check. I get that. But even if you took all of the guns, which they've done in Europe, where there are bloody terrorist attacks, hackings, bombings, cars running over people, okay? The bad guys will always find a way to commit crimes, to pursue evil doings. It will always happen. Doesn't matter how many weapons you ban. You can ban a fork. People are going to use a spoon. You can ban a car. People will use a bicycle. It doesn't matter. All you need is a big, strong piece of metal to go bash someone's head in. You don't need a gun. In fact, in some cases, like the zombie apocalypse, okay, a gun is a less effective method of protection. Go read the Zombie Survival Guide, okay? I mean, that's what I'm saying. You can't ban it all. And I know that's an overused phrase, but really, the solution is not going to be banning the guns, because then the people are going to bust down the door of schools with a baseball bat and just start whacking people left and right, okay? It will happen. I don't want that to happen. I hate that it's been happening in these schools. But the one thread of all of these school shootings is that it happens in Democrat-owned counties with a Democrat liberal sheriff. There is almost always a stand down, and there's always some kind of cover up of the real situation. Sandy Hook, we never saw the videotapes. You never get the security footage released. I can't believe they released the security footage of the sheriff standing down in Parkland, Florida. That still kind of blows me a little bit. But Wasserman Schultz says, quote, "I really think it's important to underscore that without bullets, a gun is just a hunk of useless metal and a would-be killer lacks the means to actually kill or maim. It's already illegal for convicted felons, domestic abusers, and dangerously mentally ill people to buy firearms and ammunition. Background checks also are required for some firearm purchases. They're required for all of them. But nothing prevents anyone from buying ammunition. The current system allows someone to buy as much ammunition as they want without so much as being asked their first name and walk out. By itself, the proposal wouldn't have prevented high-profile shootings. The February 14th shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, in which 17 people were killed, the October 1st shooting that killed 58 in Las Vegas, or the January 6, 2017 shooting at Fort Lauderdale International Airport, and the legislation is sure to provoke opposition from many gun owners. The NRA has yet to respond. Larry King threw his hat in the ring as well, saying that the time to repeal the poorly written Second Amendment. You can take a listen to Larry King.
Retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens is advocating.
I favor changing the Second Amendment.
Well, he's saying repeal the Second Amendment.
Repeal it and write it.
You think so?
It's poorly written.
Can't we just?
Second Amendment poorly written? Sure.
So you'd like to just rewrite it?
What they mean by militia.
Right.
You know who started the Second Amendment? Was Southern senators, so they could ward off slaves uprising.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Read the history.
I don't have time right now. Can you just give me a brief background?
Ward off slaves? Are you kidding me? This delusional, washed out radio host Larry King is up there saying rewrite the Second Amendment because it was written by Southern slave owners. Unbelievable. We're almost out of time here. I just also wanted to highlight that while this is going on, you also have David Hogg, who has been handed this platform, this week tweeted out a list of Laura Ingram's advertisers. There was a list of 10. He said, pick one of the 10 and call them and complain about Laura Ingraham, because what happened was she went up. He evidently was not. It came out that there was a couple of colleges that weren't accepting him. And so he went on CNN, and somebody on CNN said, someone on CNN said, what college is not accepting you? He's got a 4.2 GPA or whatever. In fact, here it is. CNN's Camerota to David Hogg. You can just take a listen for yourself. This was from Friday's
David,
New Day.
I am stunned that 4 colleges rejected you. What kind of dumbass colleges don't want you? I mean, you've taken the country by
This is also what's so disgusting about CNN, okay? All of a sudden, it's okay to just curse left and right on this television network. What has happened to journalistic standards? Take a listen.
Storm, how do you explain this? Did they reject you before the Parkland massacre, or how do you explain this?
They rejected me about 2 weeks ago, most of them. It was UCLA and UCSD. The way I explain it is we have a heavily impacted university system in America, and I think there's a lot of really good candidates that don't get into college, and I think it goes to show that regardless of whether or not you get into college, you can still change the world. The hardest part is just believing that you can and continuing that effort to change the world, because you eventually will.
So just because he was in a school shooting survivor, he should get into whatever college he wants? Is that what they're proposing there? How ridiculous. I didn't get into some of the colleges I applied to, but I still went to college, still went and got a good education. Not everybody gets accepted. Not everybody gets a participation trophy. And yet here he is on CNN being, lambasting UCLA, saying they didn't let me in. How dare they? Well, anyway, Laura Ingraham was commenting on this week on her radio show, and basically said that, he's kind of what I just said, that he's really expecting them to let him in and so on and so on. And he went and tweeted out her advertisers, and they have been dropping her left and right. Controversial programming, Progressive Insurance pulls ads from the Laura Ingraham show. Also, Rachel Ray's cooking site, I can't think of it right now, they dropped as well. Anyway, this says from Matthew Boyle at Breitbart, Progressive Insurance, a major publicly traded company, has decided to pull ads off Laura Ingraham's radio programs, Breitbart News confirms. In addition to the news of the decision to pull the ads, Progressive, though an ad placement firm, at least partially defined what qualifies as a reason to pull Progressive ads off the air of a certain program, quote, controversial programming. Even so, despite coining that term for this, Progressive refused to further define what it means by controversial programming. Of course, the timing would suggest that it has everything to do with her talking bad, bullying, quote unquote, David Hogg. Unbelievable. I've got so much more to go through, but I just can't get to it all. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the midst of a constitutional crisis, and I say to you, get involved and pay attention to what's happening around us, because they're coming for your guns. So now would be the time to join the NRA. Now would be the time to wake up and pay attention to what they're saying in the news, because we can all change what's happening here. Like David Hogg said, don't have to go to college to change the world. Well, don't have to listen to this creep to change the world either. I'm Nick O'Kelly, and we'll see you next week on the Sit and Spin radio show.